Hey there, everybody. Matt Lawrence back here on the deWiz Golf YouTube channel. Another very special webinar that we have coming for all of you today. We're going to be joined by Jon Tattersall, one of the top coaches in the game. Has worked with some of the best players in European Tour, PGA Tour, all kinds of different professional golfers that he has worked with. And he's going to be joined, as always, by Markus Westerberg, our co-founder. And then we have Annalise joining us today for the first time here on the YouTube channel. Annalise is our head of data science. We're going to be getting into a lot of different features about deWiz, some things that are coming down the pipeline. So for everybody in the past that have asked, do you have the ability to do this or the ability to do that? And you're going to find out today. We'll hear a lot from Annalise. We'll hear a lot from Markus about some upcoming features that we have and upcoming data points that we're excited to be able to release in the coming weeks, in the coming months. So without further ado, let's hop here into the webinar. I'm going to welcome Markus in. There is Annalise, and there is Jon Tattersall as well. Jon, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us here on the deWiz Golf YouTube channel. Before we get started, I just want, for people that may not be familiar with you, give us a little bit about your background, your coaching history, and a little introduction about yourself.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on. I've been coaching full time for probably 30 years now, based in Atlanta, but been all over the place. Originally from England, and been fascinated the whole time with technology and really trying to figure out, like, I've gone from asking players what they feel, and I still care about what they feel, but technologies really help us understand what's actually happening. And then me as a coach, I can base my opinions on better data, basically. So I've spent a lot of money on 3D motion capture, launch monitors, anything you can think of, basically, that is somewhat trying to measure what we do. I've either bought it or been around it, and been involved with the Titleist Performance Institute for almost 20 years now. And they were the first ones that really flipped the script on looking at how we assess players, measure what they're doing, and then get them better and keep them healthy. So anything in that realm, been very interested in. Always been fascinated with the speed and the power that the elite players have. I love motorsports, so I kind of use that mindset. We race cars to figure out what makes the street cars better. Same thing with golfers, basically looking at what the best players do, looking at what some of the freaks do, the long drive people, and then how can that help the recreational player. So I always tell people there's nothing you can do I haven't probably seen before, and hopefully people don't prove me wrong with that one. But I've seen most things, from absolute beginner all the way to some people that just make you sit back and wish you could do it.
That's awesome. And Markus, I'm going to kick it over to you to kind of lead this conversation. But we mentioned before we started recording here, Jon and Jon Novosel Jr. have worked a lot together in the past. So if you haven't checked out our previous YouTube video with Jon Novosel Jr. talking a lot about tempo and his app, the Tour Tempo app, check that out on our YouTube page, because there may be some similarities between the conversation today and that webinar that we did last week. But Markus, take it away, and we'll let you guys talk some golf.
Thanks so much, Matt. Great to have you here, Jon. And just before we got started, we were talking a bit about accelerations and decelerations, basically just getting more power into the golf club. And I want to get right back into that conversation and pick it up where you talked about your interest here in speed. And we have Annalise, our head of data science, here with us, who is really good at everything deWiz can do, and going back all the way into the algorithms and the code of everything. So let's start there with acceleration, deceleration things. I think it's a concept that many golfers haven't thought about, really.
Yeah, they haven't. I mean, my job is to figure out energy transfer, if you will. So we got to put energy into the golf club to figure out how to make it move at any speed for any shot. And I think a lot of people always think about acceleration, and they primarily think about acceleration on the downswing phase. And then they really don't think there's any slowing prior to impact to transfer the energy. And there's a lot of acceleration, deceleration throughout the entire body. But ultimately, if you're going to hit the ball a long way, you've got to get energy to the grip. So having the wearable on the wrist is as close to the grip as we can get. So that's why it's great to talk with you guys about what's going on, because ultimately you can look at a lot of golf swings and they may look fast in many areas. I think about juniors a lot, or ladies. They're rotating their hips quite quickly. Some of the ladies on the LPGA Tour have faster hips than the long drive guys, for instance. But the output to the end is not the same. So the closer we get to the end, ultimately club head speed is ball speed is the ultimate, I guess. We've got to affect that. but we need to know what we're doing to the grip. And a lot of people know they want club head speed. They don't know where the club head speed needs to be. A lot of people are trying to hold things coming down in the downswing. They're thinking they're delaying lag and all that kind of stuff. And a long time ago, I knew that wasn't the answer. So being able to see how fast the handle is going, how far the handle is going, and then the acceleration, and then ultimately when they start to put the brakes on to transfer the energy to the next segment, which is the club head, obviously, and then ultimately the golf ball. So I've been fascinated with that subject. I know when we look at 3D, we could see peak arm speeds, but it takes time to put people into a 3D suit, and also they're indoors. They don't have a way to go outdoors and test it. So with the deWiz, I can actually see where is the peak speed, what the handle travel was, and then I can also measure ball speed, obviously, with the launch monitor. So we can really play around with a few things, and definitely with data, you get people out of their comfort zone. A lot of fast players, it doesn't feel particularly fast to them because they don't realize how much energy they're putting in over the duration of the swing. They just think, a lot of recreational players think all the force is this direction, and that's all they focus on. So we can quantify things now, which is awesome.
That's fantastic, and makes me think about one number that we have in the app live on the market right now is the distance from max hand speed to impact, and we have seen some very interesting correlations here, partly between the level of skill in the player, the lower handicap, the greater the distance from max hand speed to impact. We also see, of course, a correlation to club head speed here.
I ask a lot of people when I'm giving them lessons, like, where do you want to have your hands going the fastest, or where do you want to have the arms going the fastest? And the ones that have been around me kind of know it's somewhere. If I'm in a watch face right now, it's somewhere around 8 o'clock on a watch face, if you will. So a lot of people that I've worked with kind of know that. But if I just ask the normal folks that I haven't worked with before, they're trying to get their arms the fastest around impact. And the concept of slowing the handle prior to impact is just completely foreign to them. They think they're not going to have face stability, a number of different things that we're seeing with the better players that we can actually measure. So they're decelerating the club rapidly, and the energy gets to the club head. So we've heard, the peak hand speed isn't quite as high as some people would imagine, and it's also, some people will say there's not a correlation between peak hand speed and club head speed ultimately. I think there obviously is, and I think it's just, if you're looking at a swing correctly, you're going to see that the energy is transferring to the club head, but you couldn't measure it. So a lot of people, like I said before, took it back too slow, and then really tried to accelerate coming down. So they didn't have time to accelerate, then decelerate. They were constantly applying force towards a target. So that would be more the linear scenario for me, where they're applying linear force and not getting it out to the angular piece, to the club head, rotating around them. So all that's pretty darn good. And Jon, Novacell, you mentioned, I've known Jon a number of years, so we knew that 1 second was about the approximate time from what time you take it back to impact. And with his research, we knew the ratio. When I met Dr. Bob Grober, he helped me understand that there has to be an amount of force applied in the backswing and then more force into the downswing. And he says to get a 3-to-1 ratio, it's about twice as much force down as it is away. And so that was eye-opening for me, because I knew the time, I knew the ratio, but I didn't know how to get to that solution. So that stuff's been pretty fascinating. It freaks people out when they're trying to go back faster. The good thing about trying to go back faster, and you guys measure hand travel, if you have more momentum away from the target, you're going to get a longer hand travel without going back and trying to make it longer. A lot of people will go back slowly and just try and stretch back, but now they're having to really create force this direction. Again, the ratio's off. The acceleration might be too much, too long, and then it doesn't ultimately get to the club head. So they scrap that idea. And the elite players have done this very, very well, even without realizing it. So to them, unfortunately, it feels smooth. So they will tell recreational players, you cannot rush from the top. You got to be smooth. You got to let the club fall, blah, blah, blah. I think they're just feeling motion away, and then they're catching that motion, and then they're adding a bit to it. So we've gone from what players say to what we actually know they do.
Yeah, that's
Again,
really
real
interesting.
versus
That's what
real.
we see in the data as well. So, I mean, if we have data points actually giving you the hand speed in the backswing, basically. So, what's the max hand speed
That's
in the
fantastic.
backswing? And we see the correlation between club head speed and that speed in the backswing, obviously.
And it's pretty early too, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's by shaft parallel they're getting up to speed. So I'm really trying to get players to rip it back and then kind of almost coast, so it can feel, you're using energy in the backswing to slow the club, which then transfers into energy in the downswing.
That's another data point we are releasing soon, is where in your backswing and percentage of the total backswing did your max backswing hand speed occur. And taking a look at a very long driver like Bryson, his is way before half of the backswing he reaches max backswing hand speed.
That's phenomenal. I can't wait to get that out to people, because I sometimes they look at me like I've got two heads, because if you talk to most golfers and they hit a bad shot, somebody will tell them they got quick on that one, which is just like, stop doing that. To me, it's they're not seeing the correct ratio of speed. And so the easy answer is you look too quick in transition because they didn't have enough speed this way. So I tell my clients, when somebody says that to them, swing back faster, ask them how they thought that looked. And usually they'll say, hey, that looks pretty good now. But the client feels like they're going back way faster. But the golfer is seeing the ratio of speed between backswing and downswing. And my job is to get people out of their comfort level, because if they were doing it right, they wouldn't need me. So I've got to push them beyond where they feel comfortable, basically.
That is true. And before we go into the data here, I know Annalise is very keen on that. I just wanted to ask you this little part of, you said before that you have these players that can accelerate, but they're not able to decelerate into impact. How would you help them do that as a coach to improve this deceleration phase and releasing the club, basically?
Yeah, there's a couple of concepts. The mass of the golf club, I don't have a golf club in my hand, but the mass of the golf club is pretty close to the club head. The golfer is feeling the weight in the handle. So they're aware of where this is. They really have a concept of where the head is. So one of the things I do is I tell them, look, the head of the club is, when you're coming down, it's somewhere back here. So that mass is trying to run off you that direction. And so you have to do something to change that direction. The golf club isn't going to swing back up plane unless you make it. I'm in my golf room right now. I'd say it's going to run off towards this right corner if you don't do something to it. So I try and make them aware of where the mass is going to. And if they understand, okay, I want the club to go back up toward the left side of the room, and it's trying to go to the right side of the room, I've got to do something to change that hand path. So I'll show them where the hands have got to try and go, understanding the head is running away from them. So that's one concept I get them to think about. And then also we hear a lot right now about using the ground, which is ultimately a very, we can pressure the ground and we can pressure the grip. Those are the only things we have contact with, basically, in a golf swing. So we can use a lower body to try and decelerate earlier, and not just, some people are showing people, okay, you got to push into the ground and then push up through impact. That's too late. They need to be pushing into the ground pretty early in transition, because it's almost like you want us to recoil situation, understanding the club is pulling off you very, very quickly. So you could try and stop the golf club prior to impact, and you couldn't do it. One of my friends used to coach Anthony Kim, and he had a drill where he called a pullback drill. You got to hit really hard and then try and pull the club backwards. Never made sense to me, but now it does make perfect sense. And Adam didn't really know. Adam just has tons of great drills. He was just experimenting with things. So that's a great way to feel it. And I also tell people, imagine you're in the trees and there's a tree trunk to the left of you, and you've got a brand new iron. You don't want to break it, but you want to hit the ball really hard out of the trees. You got to try and swing and hit, and yet not let the club pass to hit the tree. That's another way of trying to anticipate the deceleration piece. The hard thing without data is that people don't realize how early that slowing has to happen. Back to what you said about the better players, they're decelling way earlier because the energy's got to get to the club head.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, and we have seen in data also different. So if you look at the hand path or the hand speed curve, it looks different depending on what type of shot you're actually trying to hit. So if you're a really good player and you're trying to hit what we call a one piece or like a less laggy shot, the hand speed curve looks different compared to a full release where you basically are accelerating and deaccelerating maximum. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see that as well. That would be fantastic. I mean, I through looking at launch monitors, I want as minimal curve left or right as possible for the player. So if you look at a lot of great players now, the ball goes a very long way, it'll either fall right or fall left. So one of the things I'm trying to get players to do is look like they're going to hit a draw this direction and then try and hit what feels like a fade post impact. So I'm trying to get a draw for power and fade feeling for, to curve the ball less. I don't need a big hook happening for powerful players.
Yeah.
So understanding that hand path and how you can change it and where the acceleration, deceleration phases is tremendous. And that's all full swing stuff. Then there's a whole other, which we don't have time to go into, but the short game and pitching things, those kind of things that's a different force ratio. That's more 1-to-1 force because we're kind of coasting with that, which again, you guys can measure and show us data. So you're helping the golfer rather than think about, when I first came to the States 35 years ago, we were looking at pictures, we're looking at action pictures of what's going on, and we're trying to create pictures and positions. Now we're creating force over time and trying to move the club around us, and we're able to measure that, which is great. Much better way to go about getting somebody better and build skills around that.